Hi, I'm Emily Platzer with Building 61, the Boulder Library Makerspace. Today, we're going to learn a little bit about fermenting vegetables. Specifically, we'll be making sauerkraut. I learned to make sauerkraut with Sander Elix Katz's Wild Fermentation book. There's a lot of great variations on this sauerkraut recipe in that book, but the basics are you'll need some cabbage and some salt. You'll need a big bowl enough for all of your cabbage, and you'll also need a big jar enough for all of your cabbage to fit inside. Optionally, you can use some spices. I'll be using some cumin and some red pepper. You can also add other vegetables. I'll be using these walking onions. We have about 3 kilograms of vegetables that we want to process today. So I went ahead and weighed out 3 tablespoons of salt. We're going to add that intermittently, so it's nicer to have it pre-measured. Before you start cutting this cabbage, you'll want to take the outside leaves and save them for later. Try to keep them intact, but don't worry too much if they sort of come apart in places. Mine's ripping a little bit. That's probably enough. You can see that there's a little bit of damage here. I might cut that off. So now I'm going to want to cut my cabbage up. I might just take care of this leaf. Take this leaf off and cut the remaining out. That looks great. All right. Now I've weighed this bowl and written it down so that I can add as much of this cabbage and then weigh it afterwards and know exactly how much I have. But you want to kind of guess about how much you'll have together and measure out your salt so that you can add salt as you add ingredients. So here's some ingredients. Just gonna put that in there. I'm gonna add quite a bit of salt, some cumin, some red pepper, and continue. This end bit I'll save for stock. Continue chopping all of the cabbage and intermittently any other vegetables that you might want to add. So before I add the last bit of my salt, I want to weigh this out. My bowl was 769 grams, so it looks like we have about 2.5 kilograms worth of cabbage and other vegetables. So I just left a little bit of salt back to average out to be about 1 tablespoon for every kilogram. So now we're ready for the interesting part. What we're gonna wanna do is bruise this cabbage so much that when you pick it up and squeeze it, juice just comes right out of it. So use whatever instrument you have to just sort of mash it. You can use your hands, but unfortunately, as I have learned, if you just punch it, you're gonna end up really thrashing your knuckles. So maybe just some squeezes, some twisting action, and some real nice bruising with a wooden implement. If you see big chunks that are together, you can sort of break them apart, but they'll probably get broken apart in this process too. Now you might notice that some of these pieces are a little bit small, some of them are a little bit big. Whatever you'd like to cut, either coarse or fine, it all works. It's gonna be a little bit different in the product that you're making, but feel free to try coarse, feel free to try fine. The coarse will take a little bit longer to bruise enough to be juicy when you squeeze it, but I kind of like coarse. So I'm just gonna keep doing this and sporadically picking it up and squeezing it. You can already feel it feeling a little bit wetter until it really is juicy. So I started mashing with this wooden implement. Once it got a little bit more juicy, I started with my hands. Again, you don't want to punch this. You're just gonna really rough up your knuckles. But you can squeeze, you can twist, you can turn. And make sure while you're doing this, you're turning it the whole time. Otherwise you'll end up with really nicely squeezed cabbage and vegetables on top, and ones that are still really intact on the bottom. So you just turn it and squeeze it. Now, let's check. When we squeeze this, I don't know if you can see this, but it's just dripping water that came from these vegetables. And that means it's ready for the next step. We're gonna use this jar to put all of this cabbage into the jar. You will definitely want to taste this at this point. It's really, really good. You might find that you like it just like it is. In which case, save some. Put some in a jar, throw it in the fridge, and call it done. But take the rest of it and start packing your jar. You'll want this to be a fairly wide-mouthed jar so you can get your hands in there, and later we'll want to get something to weigh down the cabbage. This is so juicy. It's lovely. And the color is amazing. Last time I did this with a green cabbage, and it was also really beautiful, but this purple is just stunning. Now, as you fill your jar, you're gonna wanna start pushing it down. You can really put your weight into it. You're gonna wanna push all of that cabbage down below the juices that are coming out. If you have a funnel, it might come in handy. I don't mind making a huge mess because the whole process is a little messy. So I just kind of keep it messy until I clean it up. Oh my goodness, it's gorgeous. As you press down, if you look from the side, you'll see little bubbles rising to the top. And then sometimes when you release pressure, you'll see air running back down when it expands again. The juice in the bottom, you will definitely want to add that. So I'm just pouring it all in, scraping the sides. And again, pushing it down. So just turn it, push it down, turn it, push it down. And it's amazing, we haven't added any water. It's just salt and the vegetables and your hands. All right, so that's pretty good. We have it all pretty well submerged. Now is when you'll want to cover it with those leaves you saved from earlier. Now that we have everything packed in there, we took a leaf, we folded it under to match the shape of that jar, and we slipped it in there. We want to push that down gently so that the liquid is covering all of the cabbage underneath that big leaf. And then if we'd like, we can put something on top, something that's a little bit heavy. This just barely fits in. I might have to drop it. Oh, there we go. Just to help that leaf stay down. And then we can put a lid on it. The thing about putting a lid on it is that the first couple days especially, we're gonna need to burp it because this is gonna be creating CO2 and that's gonna need to be released. You can see that red cabbage really dyed my hands, but that's okay because it's too beautiful. I don't mind at all. So we'll be checking this tomorrow, the next day, and we'll be tasting it to see how we like it. This will go from 3 days to 3 months or beyond. The sauerkraut has been going for 12 hours. Doesn't look like there's any pressure here. We can burp it to make sure. Didn't sound like there was any pressure in there quite yet. We can also make sure that the sauerkraut is still submerged. If you like, you can take out your stone or whatever your weight is with clean hands. Just kind of get some of those bubbles to the surface by pushing around. Looks beautiful. And then we'll put this back. You can see that that juice is just a gorgeous purple color. And then we'll put the lid back on. And we'll check it again later. So it's been a couple days, and you can see that there's a little bit of surface growth here. Now that's totally okay. We want to remove it, but it doesn't mean that the whole batch has been compromised. So I'm just going to open it up, and I'm going to remove all of this and start to clean up all of those white areas. So a lot of it is on this one piece. I'm just gonna remove that and remove any extra that I find. Okay. We definitely don't want to taste this portion. Let's see, that looks pretty good. I'm gonna go ahead and wipe that inside with a paper towel. That looks pretty good. I think we got most of it, and I'm gonna discard this leaf, and then I'm gonna set something on it that's gonna push it back down again. And I'm gonna go ahead and push, of course I've just washed my hands, push this all back to release some of those air bubbles and get it all kind of submerged again. So part of the problem with what just happened is that leaf was not submerged, and I did not notice it quite right away. But it's not that big of a deal. If you find a little bit of growth on the top, you just want to remove as much as you can. It might break up. That looks like a seed. It might break up and kind of get in there, but it's no big deal. All right, that looks better. And now we'll weigh that down again. I'm just gonna get another cup to help weigh that down. Before I close it up, I'm gonna give it a little taste. That's good. I'm gonna let it go a little bit longer though. So I'm gonna go ahead and weigh it down and put this other one in top. It has been over 2 weeks since I started this. Look at this color. It's really beautiful. It's really good. I think I'm gonna keep fermenting it, but you could definitely stop that fermentation process at any point and put it in the fridge. If you wanted to keep fermenting it, like we said earlier, make sure your hands are clean and push everything below. And if you still have one of those leaves, put that on top so that when things start floating, they'll still stay submerged. I would definitely, as you are continuing to ferment this, keep an eye on it. Make sure that you taste it every once in a while. Pull off any strange growths. Keep an eye on it, and push it down periodically. But it is delicious, and it's gonna keep getting more delicious. Once you find that you just love it so much, you can always stop it. Otherwise, you can always keep letting that ferment. I hope you enjoyed learning about how to make sauerkraut. I think it's super delicious, and I hope you'll try it out. And action.
This is Ellen. My puppies have to be careful. You have to get your puppies on a run and put away from them to keep them safe. And you have to keep them safe, or they can be a little bit sad, and we get lots of food for them. So they like onions, and they love onions, and these dogs really love to hop. See them hop? Ow! And this cat loves to hop too. I'm done.